Hello and welcome to City Corner. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. On today's show, we've got Kathryn Bader from Celebrate St. Louis. She's going to tell us about this year's 2025 Independence Day celebration. And we have Yager, author of the new book, Small Town Missouri, in studio to tell us about this exciting new piece of literature. So stay with us for City Corner, coming up on STL TV. Welcome to the show. It's another time for America's celebration. Kathryn Bader's with us from Celebrate St. Louis. You're in the operations department. Thank you so much for joining us here on City Corner today. And, I guess we'll just jump right into it. It's an exciting time of year. It's not Fair St. Louis anymore. It's Celebrate St. Louis. And you've got all the great information to tell our viewers about this year's event.
Yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to tell everybody how wonderful Celebrate St. Louis is going to be this year. We have a lot of really exciting things coming up. So I'm really happy we have an opportunity to talk.
So we were chatting before the show, and we all remember the VP Fair in the 1980s. There's just 500,000 people under the arch and Chuck Berry and all this, but things have evolved over time and things have been adjusted. And a couple years ago after COVID, some things were adjusted, and I guess last year was a kind of a toned down celebration, and it's kind of moving in an upward direction as far as some of the events and things going on this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And so part of what we're trying to bring back from previous years would be a multitude of days, right? So last year, to your point, it was toned down for only one day. That was just because we wanted to give folks the best opportunity that we could. And, this year we've got enough volunteers and people to make it happen where we're looking at 2 days. So the 3rd and 4th this year are just going to be incredible.
Okay, so this year's the 3rd and the 4th.
It is.
So just out of curiosity, the 3rd's on Thursday and the 4th is on a Friday.
It is.
And so there's nothing on Saturday.
Not this year. We decided that we'd probably have most folks, afternoon of Thursday. Most people are off on Friday, and so we wanted to give them a place to come down, celebrate not only the region of St. Louis, but also America's birthday.
Yeah. Well, so, people can come down there on Thursday and Friday, and then they can go on with their 4th of July plans. If they want to go to the lake or somewhere else, then they can do that. Or,
absolutely.
Monday might come soon for a lot of people. That's a school day this year. Or maybe talk about some of the events we can look forward to this year, and perhaps we'll start with what time it starts on Thursday the 3rd.
So Thursday the 3rd, we'd love to see everybody in the afternoon, probably starting around 3 p.m. Really wanted to focus on that evening show to get everybody there, get everyone excited for our headliner, Russell Dickerson.
Russell Dickerson.
I had to think for a moment. So that'll be on the 3rd, and then the 4th, our headliner will be Gavin DeGraw. We're really happy to have him back.
And where is everything going to be this year? Because I know sometimes, sometimes it's on the arch ground under the arch. Other years it was at Forest Park during the construction of the arch grounds there. But this year, what part of town will all this stuff be going on?
Yeah, so we'll be back near the arch. So the stage will be on Lenore K. Sullivan. And then we will still have some events going on the grounds. We'll have a family area. There's some programming to kind of find there. We're trying to bring back maybe potentially a dog show. Still working out some of the items and different things to do during the day. Yeah,
we're 6 weeks out here. Let me ask you this. With you said Lenore Sullivan, that's down by the water?
It is.
Okay, so it's kind of like going a little bit back full circle, because back in the day, I remember there'd be stuff going on up here and then all the way down there, and they'd have stages everywhere. But I think it's a really cool touch to bring a stage back to Lenore Sullivan, which is kind of a tongue twister to me. But you've got the water, the river right as your backdrop, and you're sitting underneath the arch. How cool is that?
It's fantastic. And also that gives folks the ability to sit on the steps, and after you can enjoy a really great concert, you can see an amazing fireworks show. We're really excited to have fireworks both nights. So yeah, you don't even have to bring a chair if you can sit on the arch steps, and it's almost like a natural amphitheater right there. It is. I know there's some surrounding events and things going on. Sometimes there's air shows and things like that. Is there anything else that's been finalized at this point? No air show this year. We really wanted to focus on making sure that our attendees can enjoy some great music, great food, and really just come together and celebrate living in such a great city.
Mm-hmm. Any recommendations on parking or, taking the Metro Link? Is that a pretty good idea?
I highly recommend any type of carpooling, Uber. While, there will be places to park downtown, it's probably easier on families and folks if you can find some way to share a ride maybe, or maybe not have to park at all.
Now, this is like a full culmination of hard work throughout the year. I mean, everybody sees the final product, but, what goes on behind the scenes and how many months of planning does this take to get all this together?
Yeah, so we'll start planning, for example, 2026, about a week after this year. Wow. So middle of July, we'll start planning for next year and start looking at, all the fun events and acts and things that we can add for that.
You were mentioning volunteers and things. It sounds like you're pretty staffed up, but how important is it to get a lot of volunteers and get people out there supporting their local community and events like this?
It's extremely important. We couldn't do it without our volunteers, especially being that we're a nonprofit organization. The fact that we have so many people that show up to help us to put on this event and to give back to the community, we couldn't ask for more.
And I think most of these events are fueled by corporate sponsors. If you don't have corporate sponsors, it's hard to hold a free event. And is this still a free event? And how important is it to get on board with some of the local and national corporate sponsors?
It's extremely important, and it is still a free event, and it is due to the generosity of our corporate sponsors. We're very grateful that they continue year in and year out to support our efforts and help us give back to the community and keep this a free event so that way folks can come and enjoy it.
Now, do you have a specific, thing that you're in charge of at Celebrate St. Louis? Because, you're a part spokesman, and I'm sure you wear a lot of hats. Where would we see you if we're out and about hanging out over the 4th of July celebration?
Yeah, so I'm partial support for venue. I'm also partial support for concessions, meaning that I work with our food vendors, any type of beverages, and also kind of the layout of our what we like to call our map of how things kind of flow and where things land as far as where items are going to be placed.
So I've always had, in the last few years, had the opportunity to work some of the beer tents, and I always think that's a great way to dig down deep in my heart and give something back to the community, by pouring cold beverages, on my own time. And, it makes me feel great. And I know a lot of people have fun down there doing it. And with all the volunteers, it's almost like a social environment as well, because you get everybody together and you're there to work, but people are having fun too.
Absolutely. And that's, part of the reason why a lot of times we'll have what I like to call repeat volunteers. They'll sign up for one shift and then they just keep coming back just because, we have such a great time working together, and getting that community feel and being able to give back is just so important to everybody there.
Okay, we got about a minute or so left here. So is there anything that you'd like to touch on with Celebrate St. Louis, or, give kudos to some of the corporate sponsors, or anything we may have missed?
I think we covered everything that was important. Just really want to stress to everybody that we would love to have you to come down and celebrate with us this year.
So we are, at the time of this taping, we're, probably almost a couple of months out. So there's going to be more things finalized in the upcoming weeks. And where could we send our viewers to if in the next few weeks they want to get more updated information on Celebrate St. Louis 2025?
Absolutely. So it's celebratestlouis.org for our website, or if you want to follow us on our social media, we also have Facebook and Instagram at Celebrate St. Louis.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathryn, for joining us here on City Corner. We really appreciate all you do with the city of St. Louis and helping out and everything. And we appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you at the fair, or Celebrate St. Louis. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break now, but stay with us as author Kathryn Yager will join us on the flip side to talk about her new book, Small Town, Missouri.
Did you know that you can watch STL TV on your smart TV? That's right. With the new STL TV Now app, you can watch STL TV at home without a cable subscription. And That includes our live broadcast channel as well as video on demand content. We have apps for Apple TV, Fire TV, and Roku. You probably have at least one of those at home, right? But this one is a Fire TV. Now listen, it is really easy to get started. Just find the App Store on your TV, then search for STL TV Now. Select it and click to install. And in just a few seconds, you are enjoying STL TV's great programming such as City Corner, Inside Sports, City Government, and public interest coverage. Or, my personal favorite, In the Kitchen.
When I was 10, my mom got deported. We had a difficult time, and I feel that's why I didn't get to finish school. My husband is really supportive in a way that he pushed me to go back to school.
She wants to have a career so her kids can look up to her.
They both keep me motivated to go to school, and they see that if I do it, like they can do it too, you know? I feel that everything's possible.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
I'm Belinda, and this is Willard, and we were adopted in 2021. When we first met Todd, he was singing a song, and I was like, wow, look at this kid with the biggest smile, and he has a big heart to match.
The energy you give Todd, you get it back from Todd.
Yeah.
Todd's a joy.
Yes, he
Todd
is.
really is a great joy.
I love him. You and you.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods nestled into 108 city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and of course, the beautiful Tower Grove Park where I'm at now. Oh, the St. Louis Blues. We've got the St. Louis Surge, two-time WBCBL champions. We've got Harris Stowe, WashU, St. Louis University, and of course, the 11-time World Series champion, St. Louis Cardinals. So come experience St. Louis.
Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too
Sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
Did you know that you can watch STL TV on your smartphone or tablet? That's right. STL TV is available on your Android or iOS mobile devices. And that includes our live broadcast channels as well as video on demand content. It is really easy to get started. Just find the App Store on your device, then search for Cablecast. Select it and click to install. Launch the app, and if you're in the St. Louis area, STL TV should be the first channel to show up. If you're not in the area, you may have to scroll down to find it. So just click on the STL TV logo, and in just a few seconds, you're enjoying STL TV's great programming such as City Corner, Inside Sports, City Government, What's the 314, or my personal favorite, In the Kitchen.
And welcome back to City Corner. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock, and joining us now on City Corner is Kathryn Yager. She's the author of a new book, Small Town Missouri, and I must congratulate you, Kathryn, as this is your first book.
It certainly is.
Are you excited?
Very excited, very slightly overwhelmed, but in a good way. Yeah, it's been great.
Okay, so what made you want to write this book?
It actually was kind of serendipitous. I know Reedy Press through my full-time job. I've worked with them on a couple different projects, and through my work with Missouri Humanities, that's who I work for. I'm very connected and do a lot of engagement with small towns through the programming that I manage. And Josh Stevens with Reedy Press reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, we're looking to write a book about small town Missouri. Do you know anybody? Like, you're well connected in small town Missouri. Like, do you know anybody that could write that book?" And I said, I could.
Yeah, so you kind of got...
It was very like, and it's a side job. It's not part of Missouri Humanities. It's my own project, but it was a very kind of like, moment where I said, you know what? Like, I'm going to be confident and say, like, I think I can do this. And it ended up, we met a couple weeks later and talked it through, and I left a coffee meeting with a book contract. So it was very, very cool. Yeah.
You gotta like that. So you spent most of your life, I understand, in Missouri, pretty much.
Yes, pretty much. Yes.
You were born somewhere else, but...
Yes, I joke that I want to say I'm a born and bred Missourian, but technically I was born in Texas, but we moved to St. Louis when I was about 6 months old. So it's like, we can go ahead and adopt me as a lifelong Missourian, I think.
So do you travel a lot?
I do. Most of my work is within Missouri, I would say, but I'm normally in many of the small communities that the book mentions, if not more. I was just in a small town called Prairie Home yesterday, population of only about 280 people. So lots of stories to uncover and share, and it's really a lot of fun.
So there's a cachet in your book that says, after small town Missouri, it says legends, lores, and attractions. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to give the whole book away, but let's start first with legends. Okay. When I think of legends in Missouri, I think of Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, and maybe a little Jesse James.
Yeah, lots of Jesse James stories. I think there's a lot of towns that, have a little plaque somewhere, say they have some sort of link to, Jesse James hid out here, or his brother hid out here. There's lots of little stories like that. But I mean, legends was probably the most fun bullet point in the book to research, because, there are so many amazing, not just connections to people who are famous in Missouri, but nationally and internationally as well. For example, I think something that people throughout the world would recognize is Walt Disney. The town of Marceline, Missouri, which is up along Highway 36 in northern Missouri, is the hometown of Walt Disney. And, it wasn't really a story that was really celebrated or explored in Marceline until, a couple generations back. But the town had a profound impact on Walt, and he actually modeled Main Street USA in Disneyland and Disney World after Marceline's Main Street, and went on to do animated films because of the first time he saw live stage productions at the theater in Marceline. So the first production he saw was Peter Pan. And then what did Disney do? Peter Pan, the animated version of Peter Pan. So, huge internationally renowned creator with a link to a small town here in Missouri. And there's so many examples like that.
Where's Marceline?
So if you're familiar with Highway 36, it's a very busy highway that kind of bisects between Highway 70 and Iowa.
Okay.
So northern Missouri, Hannibal is on Highway 36. So if you go up north to Hannibal and cut across, it's kind of right on the middle of Missouri on Highway 36.
Now, I read where Walt Disney was thinking about putting his first big theme park in Missouri, and something happened, and so he went to California.
Yeah, I don't know the full story as to why it didn't end up here, but there is a lot of lore out there that the reason why he wanted it to be Missouri was because of Marceline.
I
Not
guess
that
we
they
have
would have
Six
put
Flags,
it there, but it's very similar,
Yeah. Well, I was reading some excerpts of your book, and an area near Six Flags is you're quite fond of, Pacific.
Yes, I'm very fond of Pacific. So Pacific is very close to St. Louis. I think it's a bit of a surprising connection to the book to put a town that close to St. Louis in as a small town in Missouri. But, because if you go 25 minutes west of St. Louis, you're still kind of in St. Louis. You're in Chesterfield, you're hitting St. Charles, and we don't think of those as small towns or rural Missouri.
Not anymore.
Right, not anymore. But Pacific is down along Highway 44, about 25 minutes from St. Louis. And it got very lucky because of what it's surrounded by, that it hasn't really fallen victim to urban sprawl. If you're familiar with the area, there's Shaw Nature Reserve, there's the Merrimack River, there are state parks down there. So it's really kind of been buffered by these natural areas and state parks that are very protected. So you're not going to get a lot of urban sprawl because you can't spread in that way. So Pacific has really stayed this beautiful, idyllic, close-knit community. It's got river history with the Merrimack River there. It's got the railroad history. It's got Route 66 history. And, you would never know when you go into downtown Pacific that this is a community where in just about 20 to 25 minutes, you're at the Arch. But it's a beautiful town. It's got great people, great amenities. So that's a perfect place to go. If you're even just looking for a couple hours of an escape from St. Louis, go down to Pacific.
I'd tell you what, you can get back on after lunch and keep heading west, because you're going to find Onondaga Cave and Merrimack Caverns and Cuba, Missouri, and St. James and Rolla on down. And with the Merrimack River right there and just some of the lakes and things, it's a beautiful part of the country, and it's a beautiful part of Missouri.
It's one of my favorites. I'm not supposed to say I have favorites, but that area of Missouri, kind of that central southeastern Missouri, has some of our best state parks, I think. Beautiful rivers. Think about the Current River, the Jacks Fork River. There are so many beautiful places for outdoor recreation. That part of Missouri has such rich history. If you think of St. Genevieve, Potosi, Missouri, those towns are deeply, deeply rooted in Missouri history as some of the original European settlements here in Missouri. So there's just so much to find down there and so much history. And I think it often gets overlooked. When people think of destinations in Missouri, they tend to think, obviously, St. Louis and Kansas City, but even, Herman and other places that are part of Missouri wine country, St. James, those still might get a little bit more notice. But I like to point out, some of those areas of Missouri where, you might never have heard of the town, but you have heard of the state parks or the rivers. So it's about telling you about the towns that are associated with those, so you get to know the full story.
I work at Classic Rock 93.1, KBDZ at 101.7 FM. And I think our offices are in St. Genevieve, and we've got, Perryville, we've got Perryville covered. I'm thinking of different towns along the way, and they've got such a beautiful town square. And then St. Genevieve with all the wineries and just the flowing, rolling wine country hills right there of southeast Missouri. So going down Highway 55 into Kimmswick.
Yes.
It's almost like every 5 or 10 minutes you come across another beautiful little quaint town with a town square and a judge and and they've all got their own little identities.
They do. And I think, what you're kind of getting at is, there are so many pieces of this book. If you look at, I think it's right before the introduction in the book, there's a map that maps out all the towns that were represented in this book. And a big goal was to have a lot of geographic representation to show that you can go, to any corner of Missouri and find these beautiful places and these beautiful stories. But another aspect of it is, yes, you could go down Highway 55, Highway 44, Highway 36, and pick a handful of communities and have a really great road trip and visit all these different places. And instead of spending 1 week in one place, as we might think for a vacation, get to know your state, get to know Missouri, and spend time in multiple towns with different stories and different people and different places to explore.
One of my favorite drives in Missouri is going down Highway 67. You can take Highway 21 down that way or Highway 30, but 55 usually to 67, like the Crystal City Festus turn off.
Right.
And all of a sudden you just see the trees, changing colors in the fall. And you go down there and it's not too far, you're in Bonne Terre, and you've got like this huge area with underground mines and, people are underground in the water, floating around in kayaks and things.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool too.
It is. And Missouri is a very interesting state that, I think sometimes when you think of a certain state in the country, you picture a certain geography. Missouri has so many different kinds of geography in one state. You talk about going down Highway 67, or I think about going down Highway 44, and you hit those rolling hills of the Ozarks. And it's beautiful, and it's lush, and it's these green pines. But then you can also go north, and you hit kind of the farmland and the plains. And it's just, mountains down the Ozark Mountains and the rivers. There's so many different places you can experience that seem like you're in a completely different place than where you just were. It's really great.
And just think about all the little town festivals.
Yeah.
People have their state fairs in different counties and things, and that's always a great way to bring people together and families.
It is, and it's often, I often hear when I talk to these communities that their town festival is like a big family reunion. Everybody that graduated high school from that town is always going back during the big festival because it's like a class reunion. It just, people from all over the country that have roots in that community come together. And it's just the best representation of that community's story and the people coming together.
A lot of people call Missouri a flyover state from the West and East Coast, and I'm kind of like, keep on flying, I like it is. But with that being said, some of what used to be small towns, like Cape Girardeau and Springfield, Branson, the Lake of the Ozarks, they're not so small anymore.
No. And it's funny, I find it really intriguing to look at the histories of certain communities and why some grew and some didn't. A lot of times we look at things like the railroad. A railroad coming in could be a reason for a town's existence, but when it leaves, what happens to that community? A really great case study for that is the Katy Trail. The Katy Railroad was, if you look along the Katy Trail, those towns existed because they were a depot along the Katy Railroad, and that railroad left in the 80s, and those towns didn't have that connection that they used to. But when the Katy Trail State Park was developed, they then had something. And I think it's a really interesting case study in, how you can better promote your communities and get people out and exploring these communities and their stories. But, places like Springfield where universities popped up and helped that town grow into a college town, or down in Cape Girardeau with the river history and the amenities they have down there. And again, another college town. I think universities really helped get smaller communities back on the map and get them to explore.
I don't think a lot of people realize towns like Cottleville. You're all of a sudden in St. Charles and you're in a small little quaint town like that. You head down about 10 minutes and you're in Defiance, you're in the wine country, and then you got like the Daniel Boone House and that museum, and it just seems fantastic how we've preserved things and parks in Missouri, and some of the towns aren't so small anymore, but a lot of them will be preserved for a long time. Before we let you go, I know you got a couple book signings coming up, and is there anything else we could direct our viewers to your website or anywhere they could find out about your book?
The book is available wherever books are sold. Your major retailers, small town bookstores, places local here in St. Louis, but the goal is to get it throughout the state. I have a personal, author social media page, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Caitlin Yager Author, and you can of course purchase the book at readypress.com as well. So, they'll be on my social media will be where all of my book events are, so I'll be kind of all around promoting the book.
Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today on City Corner. We really appreciate it. And we'd also like to thank Kathryn Bader from Celebrate St. Louis, folks. It's just a few weeks out. Celebrate St. Louis, get down and have some great times downtown in a fun family environment. Well, that's our show for today. Especially like to thank our studio guests. We'd like to thank you for watching City Corner on STL TV. Experience St. Louis.